The screen is pitch black. Suddenly, a grainy, high-angle CCTV feed flickers to life. The timestamp reads November 4th, 2024, 11:43 p.m. We see a young woman, Madison Cole, reaching for her car door in a dimly lit corner of the Elite Fitness parking lot in Wichita, Kansas. She's alone, or so she thinks. In the corner of the frame, a dark, hooded figure emerges from the gym's side exit. He doesn't run. He doesn't shout. He just walks with a slow, terrifying purpose. Madison turns, her key fob flashing the headlights of her silver Honda. She freezes. Her body language shifts from relaxed to pure, instinctual terror. She says something, her hand reaching for her phone, but the figure is already closing the gap. Just as he reaches out to grab her, the screen cuts to static. That was the last time Madison Cole was seen on camera. What no one knew at that moment was that this wasn't a random attack. This was the climax of a months-long, silent hunt. The man in the hoodie wasn't a stranger. He was the owner's son, a man who had been watching Madison through the gym's high-definition security monitors for hours every single night. He knew her routine better than she did. He knew exactly which locker she used, which path she took to her car, and exactly how many seconds he had before she would lock her doors. To understand how a routine late-night workout turned into a nightmare that would haunt Kansas for years, we have to go back to the beginning. Madison Cole was a 29-year-old dental hygienist. She was the kind of person who had her life together. She was disciplined, kind, and incredibly hardworking. Because her days were filled with patience, she cherished her late-night workouts at Elite Fitness. At 10 p.m., the gym was usually empty, giving her the peace she needed to decompress. She followed a strict schedule. Legs on Mondays, upper body on Wednesdays, cardio on Fridays. But Madison wasn't as alone as she felt. Inside the gym's glass-walled office, Tyler Brennan, the 28-year-old son of the gym's owner, sat in the dark. Tyler was a personal trainer who didn't really train anyone. He was a man who had been handed everything and worked for nothing. While Madison was focused on her squats in the weight room, Tyler was focused on her. He wasn't just glancing at the security monitors. He was obsessed. On his phone, he had a specialized app that allowed him to zoom in on any camera in the building. He would sit for hours, his face illuminated by the blue light of the screen, watching Madison through the lens of camera 4. Tyler had tried to talk to Madison before. He had approached her 4 separate times. He offered her free training. She said, "No, thank you." He asked her for coffee. She said, "I'm busy." He asked her for dinner. She told him she wasn't interested. Madison was never mean. She was just firm. She set a boundary, and in her mind, that was the end of it. But for Tyler, every no felt like a slap in the face. He felt entitled to her time. He felt entitled to her attention. When he couldn't get it through conversation, he decided to take it through observation. As the weeks went by, Tyler's behavior shifted from creepy to predatory. He began taking screenshots of her from the security feed. He started a folder on his computer labeled M-Schedule. He documented when she arrived, what she wore, and how long she stayed. He even knew which streetlights in the parking lot were flickering and which areas were hidden in total shadow. Madison felt the weight of his stare, even when she couldn't see him. She told her friends she felt like she was being watched. She even changed her workout time to be even later, hoping to miss him entirely. She didn't realize that by going later, she was giving him exactly what he wanted, a completely empty building. On the night of November 4th, Madison pulled into the lot at 10:04 p.m. She walked inside, waved to the front desk, and started her routine. Little did she know, Tyler had clocked in early just to be there when she arrived. He watched her for nearly 2 hours, hardly blinking. At 11:38 p.m., Madison finished her workout and headed to the locker room to change. Tyler stood up from his desk, pulled a dark hoodie over his head, and walked toward the exit. He waited just inside the door, watching the locker room exit. When Madison walked out, smelling like shampoo and carrying her gym bag, he let her get a head start. He counted to 8, then pushed the door open. He followed her into the cold Kansas night, staying in the shadows. Madison reached her car and pressed the unlock button. The beep-beep of the car echoed in the empty lot. She opened the door, tossed her bag inside, and turned around to close it. There he was, standing just 5 feet away. "Tyler?" she gasped, her heart hammering against her ribs. "What are you doing out here? You scared me." Tyler didn't answer. He just stared at her with eyes that looked completely hollow. He took a step forward, and Madison noticed he was wearing heavy work gloves. She lunged for her phone on the driver's seat, but Tyler was faster. He grabbed her arm with a grip so tight it felt like bone would snap. Madison opened her mouth to scream, but as she did, she looked past Tyler toward the gym entrance and saw something that made her blood run cold. A second figure was standing in the doorway, watching them. Madison's heart hammered against her ribs as she stared at the figure in the doorway. It was a silhouette she recognized immediately: Gerald Brennan, the owner of the gym and Tyler's father. For a split second, a wave of relief washed over her. She thought he was there to stop his son, to intervene, to save her. But Gerald didn't move. He didn't shout. He simply reached out, grabbed the handle of the heavy industrial door, and pulled it shut, turning off the only bright light reflecting into the parking lot. He didn't just walk away. He locked the door from the inside, leaving Madison alone in the shadows with his son. The realization hit Madison like a physical blow. There was no help coming from the gym. Tyler felt her arm go limp for a second and used the opportunity to jerk her toward the back of his pickup truck, which was parked in a dark, dead zone of the CCTV coverage. Madison found her voice and screamed, a high, piercing sound that cut through the silent night air. She kicked, her gym sneakers scraping against the asphalt, trying to find any leverage. She managed to rake her fingernails across Tyler's cheek, drawing blood, but he didn't even flinch. He was fueled by a terrifying, quiet rage that made him feel twice as strong as he was. "You should have just said yes, Madison," Tyler hissed, his voice trembling with a mix of excitement and anger. "I offered you everything. I was nice. I was the nice guy." He threw her into the bed of the truck, the cold metal slamming against her back. Before she could scramble out, he threw a heavy, weighted tarp over her and slammed the tailgate shut. Madison was trapped in a suffocating world of plastic and darkness. She could hear the engine roar to life and feel the vibration of the truck as it sped out of the parking lot, weaving through the backstreets of Wichita. Inside the gym, Gerald Brennan walked back to the security office. He looked at the monitors, seeing the empty parking lot where Madison's car still sat, its driver's side door wide down. He knew his son was troubled. He knew about the previous complaints, the women who had cried in his office, and the police reports he had paid to make disappear. He told himself he was protecting his family, but in reality, he was feeding a monster. He reached for the digital recorder and began deleting the last 10 minutes of footage from the parking lot camera, unaware that the system had already backed up the files to a remote cloud server he didn't know existed. Meanwhile, Madison was fighting for her life in the back of the truck. She managed to get one hand free from the tarp and felt around the truck bed. Her fingers brushed against something cold and sharp, a metal tire iron. She gripped it, her knuckles white, waiting for the truck to stop. She prayed they were heading toward a red light or a gas station, anywhere with people. But the truck wasn't slowing down for traffic. It was bumping over uneven ground, the sound of gravel spraying against the wheel wells. They were heading away from the city lights. The truck finally came to a jarring halt. The silence that followed was even more terrifying than the drive. Madison heard the heavy clunk of the driver's door opening, then the slow, deliberate footsteps of Tyler walking toward the back of the truck. She tightened her grip on the tire iron, her breath coming in shallow hitches. The tailgate dropped with a loud bang. The tarp was ripped away, and the moonlight spilled into the truck bed, illuminating Tyler's face. He had a jagged scratch running down his face, and his eyes were wide and frantic. "Get out," he commanded, reaching for her. Madison didn't wait. She swung the tire iron with every ounce of strength she had. The metal bar caught Tyler across the shoulder, sending him stumbling back with a cry of pain. Madison jumped from the truck and bolted into the darkness. She didn't know where she was, only that she needed to run. She was in a field of tall, dead grass near a cluster of crumbling industrial buildings. Her lungs burned as she sprinted toward a large, darkened warehouse about 50 yards away. She could hear Tyler behind her, his footsteps heavy and fast, his breathing ragged with fury. She reached the warehouse and pulled on a heavy sliding door. It groaned but moved just enough for her to slip inside. The air inside smelled of rot, old grease, and damp concrete. It was an abandoned textile mill, a maze of rusted machinery and falling timber. Madison ducked behind a massive iron loom, her heart thumping so loudly she was sure he could hear it. She looked around for an exit, a phone, anything, but the warehouse was a tomb. Outside, Tyler stood by the door, his silhouette framed by the moon. He didn't rush in. He knew this place. He had spent his childhood playing in these ruins. His father used to own this land before the company went bankrupt. He knew every hiding spot, every loose floorboard, and every dead end. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a flashlight, clicking it on. The beam of light sliced through the darkness, dancing across the rusted machines like a searchlight. "I can hear you breathing, Madison," he whispered, his voice echoing off the high ceilings. "There's no point in running. This is where you're going to finally listen to me." Madison pressed her back against the cold iron, tears streaming down her face. She looked down at her hands, realizing she had dropped the tire iron when she climbed through the door. She was unarmed. She looked up and saw a narrow staircase leading to a second-floor catwalk. If she could get up there, maybe she could find a window or a fire escape. She began to crawl toward the stairs, moving inch by inch, trying not to make a sound. She reached the first step and began to climb. The wood groaned under her weight. She froze, her heart stopping. Below her, the flashlight beam snapped toward the stairs. Tyler was smiling. He didn't run. He walked toward her, knowing she had nowhere left to go. Madison scrambled up the remaining steps and onto the metal catwalk. She ran toward the far end, but as she reached the center, the rusted metal gave way with a deafening screech. Madison screamed as she fell through the floor, plunging toward the concrete below. But she didn't hit the ground. Her jacket caught on a jagged piece of rebar, leaving her dangling 10 feet in the air, gasping for breath as Tyler walked slowly toward the spot directly beneath her. Madison hung suspended in the air, the jagged rebar groaning as it tore slowly through the fabric of her jacket. Her feet dangled helplessly over the dark concrete floor. Below her, Tyler stood perfectly still. He didn't reach up to help her, and he didn't move to catch her. He simply watched her struggle, the beam of his flashlight fixed on her face. The light was so bright it made her eyes water, but she could still see the twisted, calm expression on his face. It was the look of a collector who had finally caught a rare specimen. "You're so beautiful when you're not talking back," Tyler said, his voice dropping to a low, conversational tone. He reached out and grabbed a nearby wooden crate, dragging it slowly across the floor until it was positioned directly under her swinging feet. He climbed up onto the crate, bringing his face just inches from hers. Madison could smell the stale energy drinks and the metallic scent of the blood from the scratch on his cheek. She tried to spit at him, but her throat was too dry. She was losing strength, and the rebar was beginning to bend under her weight. With a sudden, violent jerk, the fabric gave way. Madison braced for the impact, but Tyler caught her. He didn't catch her gently. He tackled her midair, slamming her down onto the wooden crate and then onto the hard floor. The wind was knocked out of her, leaving her gasping for air. Before she could recover, Tyler was on top of her, pinning her wrists to the dusty concrete. He wasn't hitting her, not yet. He was just staring, his eyes darting across her face, as if he were trying to memorize every detail. "Why wasn't I good enough?" he asked, his voice cracking. "I watched you for months. I knew you liked the blue Gatorade. I knew you always did 3 sets of 15 on the leg press. I knew you better than anyone, and you wouldn't even give me 5 minutes of your time." Madison looked up at him, her fear momentarily replaced by a cold, sharp realization. This man didn't love her. He didn't even like her. He was in love with the version of her he had built in his head while watching those security monitors. To him, she wasn't a human being with feelings and a life. She was a character in a movie he was directing. While Madison was trapped in the warehouse, the outside world was beginning to notice she was gone. At the Wichita North Police Station, Detective Laura Kim was just starting her night shift. She was a veteran investigator known for her attention to detail and her refusal to be intimidated. Shortly after midnight, a patrol officer called in a report of an abandoned vehicle at Elite Fitness. Madison's silver Honda was still sitting in the lot, the door wide open, her gym bag and phone sitting on the passenger seat. In the world of police work, an open door and a left-behind phone are the loudest alarm bells there are. Detective Kim arrived at the gym by 12:30 a.m. She didn't wait for morning. She called the owner, Gerald Brennan, and told him to meet her at the gym immediately. When Gerald arrived, he looked disheveled and nervous. He claimed he had been asleep at home, but Kim noticed something odd. The engine of his luxury SUV was clicking as it cooled down, a sound that only happens after a long or fast drive. She also noticed a small smear of grease on his forearm. "I need to see the footage, Gerald," Kim said, her voice like ice. Gerald led her into the office, his hands trembling as he pulled up the camera system. He showed her the footage of Madison arriving. He showed her the footage of her working out. But when he reached the 11:40 p.m. mark, the screen went black. "System glitch," Gerald muttered. "The cameras at the back have been acting up for weeks. I've been meaning to have Tyler fix them." Kim narrowed her eyes. She didn't believe in coincidences. She leaned over and looked at the server rack under the desk. A small blue light was blinking, the cloud sync indicator. Back in the warehouse, the psychological torture was escalating. Tyler had dragged Madison into a small, windowless storage room at the back of the building. He had tied her hands with zip ties he had taken from his truck. He sat on a folding chair in front of her, eating a protein bar as if they were just having a normal conversation at the gym. He talked about his childhood, about how his father always told him he was special, and how the world just didn't understand his potential. Madison tried to play along, hoping to find a moment of weakness. She told him she was sorry, that she had been stressed at work, that she was ready to listen now. For a moment it seemed to work. Tyler's posture relaxed. He leaned forward, reaching out to stroke her hair. "I knew you'd understand," he whispered. "I knew we were meant to be together." But then, Madison's eyes drifted to the door. She saw a small, rusted metal shard on the floor, just inches from her bound hands. She shifted her weight, trying to reach for it. Tyler saw her eyes move. His expression flipped instantly from affection to pure, unadulterated rage. He stood up, kicking the chair across the room. "You're lying," he screamed. "You're just like the others. You're just waiting for me to turn my back so you can run." He grabbed a heavy roll of industrial duct tape from the corner of the room. He didn't just tape her mouth. He began to tape her entire body to the support pillar in the center of the room. Madison struggled, but the more she moved, the tighter the tape became. She was being mummified against the cold steel. As Tyler finished, he stood back to admire his work. He checked his watch. "I have to go back and help my dad clean up the parking lot," he said casually. "But don't worry, Madison. I'll be back. We have so much more to talk about." He turned off his flashlight, plunging the room into total, suffocating darkness. Madison listened to his footsteps fade away, followed by the sound of his truck driving off. She was alone, trapped in a pitch-black room in a warehouse no one visited, held by layers of tape she couldn't break. She spent hours in that darkness, her mind racing. She tried to rub the tape against the rough edge of the pillar, but her muscles were cramping. Just as she was about to give up hope, she heard a sound. It wasn't a truck. It was a soft, rhythmic scratching coming from the other side of the storage room wall. It sounded like something, or someone, was trying to get in. A small crack of light appeared near the floorboards. Someone was outside. Madison tried to scream through the tape, but only a muffled grunt came out. The scratching stopped. Then, a voice whispered from the shadows of the warehouse floor. "Is someone in there? I'm just looking for cans. Please don't hurt me." It was an old man's voice, trembling with fear. It was Raymond Foster, a local homeless man who used the warehouse for shelter. Madison slammed her head against the pillar as hard as she could, creating a dull thud. "Hello?" the voice said, closer now. The door creaked open, and the dim light of a flickering lantern spilled in. Raymond stepped into the room, his eyes widening as they landed on the woman taped to the pillar. He dropped his bag of cans, the metal clattering loudly on the floor. He ran toward her, reaching into his pocket for a small pocketknife. "Oh, Lord! Hold on, miss, I'll get you out." He began to saw through the tape, his hands shaking. Madison felt the pressure release. She was seconds away from being free. But just as the last layer of tape snapped, the front doors of the warehouse shrieked open. The roar of a high-powered engine filled the building. Tyler was back. And this time, he wasn't alone. Madison heard his voice, but she also heard the deep, commanding tone of his father, Gerald. "I told you to finish it, Tyler." Gerald's voice echoed through the vast space. "Now we have to take care of both of them." The warehouse lights, the heavy, orange sodium lamps that hadn't been used in years, suddenly flickered and buzzed to life, bathing the room in a sickly, artificial glow. Madison and Raymond froze. The old man had only managed to cut the tape around Madison's chest, but her legs were still bound to the pillar. Tyler and Gerald were standing at the entrance of the storage room. Tyler looked frantic, his clothes stained with sweat and dirt, but Gerald looked different. He was wearing a clean suit, his face a mask of cold, calculated business. He wasn't there as a father saving his son. He was there as a man protecting his empire. "You had to make it difficult, didn't you, Madison?" Gerald said, stepping over Raymond's discarded bag of cans. He didn't even look at Raymond, as if the old man were nothing more than a piece of trash. "We could have handled this. We could have settled this. But now you've brought a witness into my building." Raymond tried to stand up, his small pocketknife trembling in his hand. Tyler lunged forward, disarming the old man with a single, brutal kick to the ribs. Raymond collapsed, gasping for air, as Tyler pinned him to the ground. "Dad, what do we do?" Tyler asked, his voice high in panic. The police were at the gym. "That woman, Detective Kim, she's smart. She's looking at the cloud." Gerald silenced him with a sharp look. "I handled Kim. I told her the system was down. But we don't have much time." He turned back to Madison, who was frantically picking at the tape on her legs. "Madison, you're a smart girl. You know how the world works. My family has built this city. We provide jobs. We provide safety. My son, he has a problem, yes. But he's my blood. And I won't let a dental hygienist and a vagrant destroy 30 years of work because he got a little carried away." Madison looked him in the eye, her fear turning into a burning, white-hot rage. "A little carried away? He kidnapped me. He watched me for months like I was an animal. You're just as sick as he is." Gerald didn't flinch. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a heavy, black handgun. He didn't point it at her. Not yet, but the message was clear. "Tyler, take the old man to the basement. I'll deal with Madison." Tyler grabbed Raymond by the collar and dragged him out of the room. Madison listened to Raymond's muffled pleas fade away, replaced by the heavy silence of the storage room. Gerald stepped closer, the gun now hanging at his side. "It's a shame, really. You were one of our best members. You never complained. You always paid on time. If you had just gone to dinner with him once, we wouldn't be here." While Gerald was lecturing Madison, Detective Kim was miles away, sitting in her patrol car outside the elite fitness gym. She wasn't convinced. She had used her tablet to bypass the gym's local security protocols, accessing the manufacturer's server for the CCTV system. As she scrolled through the logs, she saw something that made her stomach drop. The footage hadn't just glitched. It had been manually deleted from the local drive at 12:15 a.m., exactly when Gerald claimed he was at home. Even more disturbing, she found a GPS log for Tyler's truck. It had stopped at an old textile warehouse on the east side of town. Kim didn't call for backup yet. She knew that if Gerald had a scanner, he'd hear the sirens and finish whatever he was doing. She started her engine and drove toward the warehouse, her lights off, her heart racing. She knew every second counted. Back in the storage room, Gerald was getting impatient. He looked at his watch and then at Madison. "I'm going to give you a choice, Madison. You can make this easy, or you can make this very hard." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, glass vial and a syringe. "This will just make you go to sleep. You won't feel anything. We'll tell everyone you left town, that you couldn't handle the stress. Your car is already being moved to the airport." Madison knew he was lying. There was no way they were letting her live. As Gerald leaned in to grab her arm, Madison saw her chance. She hadn't been picking at the tape. She had been reaching for the small metal shard she had seen earlier. Her fingers finally closed around it. As Gerald's hand touched her shoulder, she swung her arm with everything she had, driving the rusted metal deep into Gerald's neck. Gerald let out a gurgling cry, dropping the gun and the syringe. He clutched his throat, blood blooming between his fingers like a dark red flower. Madison didn't wait. She grabbed the pocketknife Raymond had dropped and sliced through the remaining tape on her legs. She scrambled to her feet, her legs cramped and shaking. She grabbed the handgun from the floor and bolted out of the room. The warehouse was a labyrinth of shadows. She could hear Tyler screaming from the basement, a sound of pure, primal grief. He must have heard his father's cry. Madison ran toward the front doors, but they were locked from the outside with a heavy chain. She turned around, looking for another way out, when she saw Tyler emerging from the basement stairs. He wasn't crying anymore. He was holding a heavy industrial crowbar, and his face was twisted into a mask of pure, murderous insanity. "You killed him!" Tyler shrieked, the sound echoing off the high, rusted ceilings. "You killed my father!" Madison leveled the gun at him, her hands shaking so hard the barrel was dancing. "Stay back, Tyler. I mean it. I'll shoot." Tyler didn't stop. He started to run, the crowbar raised over his head. Madison pulled the trigger, but the only sound was a sickening click. The safety was on. She fumbled with the slide, trying to remember how to use it, but Tyler was already on her. He swung the crowbar, catching her across the ribs. Madison flew backward, the gun skittering across the floor and falling through a gap in the floorboards into the flooded sub-basement below. She was unarmed again. Tyler stood over her, the crowbar dripping with a dark fluid. He raised the heavy iron bar for a final, crushing blow. Madison closed her eyes, waiting for the end. But instead of the strike, she heard the sound of shattering glass and a booming voice that sounded like thunder. "Police! Drop the weapon!" Detective Kim was standing in the shattered remains of a side window, her service weapon trained on Tyler. But Tyler didn't drop the crowbar. He looked at Kim, then back at Madison, and a terrifying smile spread across his lips. He didn't run. Instead, he lunged toward Madison, not to hit her, but to grab her and pull her toward the edge of a massive, open elevator shaft that dropped 50 feet into the darkness. The air in the warehouse was thick with the smell of damp concrete and the copper tang of blood. Tyler's fingers dug into Madison's shoulders like talons as he dragged her toward the yawning black mouth of the elevator shaft. He wasn't trying to escape anymore. He was trying to take her with him. Detective Kim fired a warning shot into the ceiling, the roar of the gun echoing like a cannon blast, but Tyler was beyond the reach of reason. He was laughing, a high, broken sound that chilled Madison to her very core. "If I can't have you, no one will," he screamed. Madison threw her weight forward, her heels skidding on the slick floor. Just as they reached the precipice, Detective Kim closed the distance. She didn't fire again. The risk of hitting Madison was too high. Instead, she tackled Tyler from the side. The impact sent all three of them sprawling. Madison felt the air rush past her face as she slid toward the edge, her fingers clawing at the floorboards until she managed to snag a rusted bolt. She hung there, her legs dangling over the 50-foot drop, as Kim struggled to pin Tyler's arms behind his back. Tyler fought with the strength of a man possessed, his movements jerky and unpredictable. He managed to throw Kim off and scrambled toward Madison, his eyes fixed on her clinging fingers. But before he could reach her, the floorboards, weakened by decades of rot and the weight of their struggle, gave way. With a sickening crack, the wood beneath Tyler vanished. He didn't scream. He just stared at Madison with a look of intense, quiet hatred as he disappeared into the darkness of the shaft. A second later, a dull, heavy thud echoed up from the bottom, followed by a silence that was even more terrifying. Detective Kim lunged forward, grabbing Madison's wrists and pulling her back onto solid ground. Madison collapsed into the detective's arms, her body shaking with violent, uncontrollable sobs. For several minutes, the only sound in the massive warehouse was the distant hum of the city and Madison's ragged breathing. Kim didn't let go. She held her until the backup sirens began to wail in the distance, their blue and red lights dancing against the shattered windows of the textile mill. The aftermath was a whirlwind of forensic teams, flashing cameras, and yellow tape. Investigators found Gerald Brennan in the storage room. The wound Madison had inflicted was severe, but the paramedics managed to stabilize him. He would survive to face trial, but his empire was gone. In the basement, they found Raymond Foster. The old man was battered and bruised, but alive. He would later become the star witness, his testimony painting a horrific picture of the Brennans' family business. When the divers finally recovered Tyler from the flooded subbasement, they found more than just his body. Strewn across the floor of the shaft were items that turned the case from a kidnapping into a historical nightmare. They found jewelry, driver's licenses, and hair clips belonging to 3 other women who had gone missing in the Wichita area over the last 5 years. Tyler hadn't just been watching Madison. He had been a predator in the shadows of elite fitness for a long, long time. His father, Gerald, had used his wealth and influence to scrub the digital footprints and silence the whispers, unknowingly, or perhaps knowingly, facilitating a serial killer. The trial of Gerald Brennan became a national sensation. The defense tried to argue that he was just a father blinded by love, a man trying to help his sick son. But Detective Kim's evidence was undeniable. The cloud-synced footage showed Gerald watching the parking lot abduction. It showed him locking the gym doors. It showed the cold, calculated way he protected a monster. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for his role in the kidnapping, the attempted murder of Madison Cole, and as an accessory to the murders of the other women found in the warehouse. Madison Cole's life was forever changed. She moved away from Wichita, seeking a place where the shadows didn't look like hooded figures and the sound of a gym locker closing didn't make her heart stop. She became a fierce advocate for victims of stalking, working to pass Madison's Law, which requires gyms and private businesses to provide immediate, unedited access to security footage to law enforcement in missing persons cases. She no longer works out late at night. She no longer trains alone. The elite fitness building was demolished a year later. In its place stands a small community park with bright, solar-powered lights that stay on all night long. There is a plaque at the entrance dedicated to the women whose lives were stolen in the shadows of the warehouse. It serves as a reminder that no is not an invitation to try harder. It is not a challenge to be overcome. It is a boundary that must be respected. The CCTV footage from November 4, 2024, is still used in police training academies across the United States. It is shown as a masterclass in recognizing the pre-attack indicators of a stalker. When you watch the video, you see Madison doing everything right. She was aware, she was firm, and she was brave. But the story of Madison Cole isn't just a story about a victim who fought back. It's a warning about the systems that protect predators and the silence that allows them to thrive. It reminds us that behind every creepy interaction is a potential tragedy, and that believing women when they say they are uncomfortable is the first step in making sure no one else ever ends up in that warehouse. Madison's story ended in survival, but for many others, the footage stops before the help arrives. As you go about your day, remember Madison. Remember that your safety is worth more than someone else's ego. And remember that no is the only word that should ever matter. This concludes the story of Madison Cole. What do you think about the role the father played in this case? Should he have received the same sentence as a killer? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives into the cases that changed everything.